How's it going? How's it going? Okay, I asked twice, and the first time I got dead silence. The second time I got some, so that's good. Welcome, everyone. This is the final week of our series, Red Flags and Green Lights. This week we have a panel, as you might have been able to guess, because there's a lot more of us out here than there normally are. So, what I'm going to do is some of you guys know us, some of you guys don't know us. So we're going to go down the line. We're going to introduce ourselves by saying our names. And then I have two couples joining me. So I'm going to ask you guys, how long have you been married? And then how long were you together before you were married? So that's both dating and engaged. I'll start by introducing myself. My name's Katie. My husband isn't up here, but I have one. We have been married for 7 months. We were together for almost 2 years. It was like 1 month short of 2 years before we got married. So that's me.
I'm Stephanie. I'm Jason's wife, and we have been married for 23 years in July. And I'll let him say how long we were together before we got married.
That was the harder one. Well, I'm Jason. You know me. Well, what are we talking about? Like, we were friends. We were best friends for like throughout high school, and then we were dating for yeesh, 2 years, 3 years, 3.5 years. We were dating. Yes. Thanks. Yep, that's us. Thanks.
I'm Carly. I'm married to Brandon, and we have been married 7 years in June next month. And yeah, you can also answer. I like how Stephanie set Jason up. How long were we together?
I don't even have to think. Whoa, I don't even have to think about that one. We were dating for a year and then engaged for a year, so 2 years.
To be fair, you had time to think about it because you knew it was coming. But
All right, so throughout this series, we encourage you guys to submit questions for this panel. So we got quite a bunch of them. So we're going to try and get through as many as we can. The first one that I wanted to address before we even fully dive into asking them all these questions is one of the ones we got is, does the Bible mention dating at all? And the funny thing is, the Bible doesn't mention dating. Like, if you were to try and find the word dating in the Bible, it wouldn't be something you could find. Mainly because back then, marriage was like two families would get together and be like, hey, my son, your daughter, let's make it happen. And it was kind of like arranged marriages, or there was like courtship or all this stuff. So the Bible doesn't explicitly mention dating. However, it is still something that we can turn to the Bible to find wisdom in our dating lives. And that's the case for so many things in this world. People are always like, oh, the Bible doesn't say anything about vaping or social media or screen time or anything like that. And it's like, okay, sure, it doesn't mention those things specifically, but you can still turn to the Bible to find wisdom on those specific things, which is what we're going to be talking about on this panel. So, first question, starting off with probably a pretty big one. What if the person you like doesn't believe in God?
I mean, if you're thinking about dating them, run away as fast as you can from a dating situation with them. I don't think that, dating to save someone or marrying someone with the intention of saving them is a very good idea. And I don't think that the Bible says it's a very good idea. I think if you're going to be friends, there's nothing wrong with that. But just entering a dating relationship wouldn't be a wise thing. You're going to have different ideas about how the world works, where we came from, and those things might not seem like a big deal until you are in a relationship and you're having fights about those things, or you have children someday, which seems like a very far way off. But when you're dating someone, you want to think about those things now so that you're not surprised by them later and then wondering what went wrong.
And I would say ultimately, you don't want to be dating someone that's pulling you away from God. And if they're not a saved Christian, they don't have the same morals as you, so they might view things through a different lens than how you would see them.
All right, thanks, guys. The second question Sorry, my brain has been malfunctioning all day, so let's hope I make it through this panel. Uh, should you date to marry in high school, or as we currently have middle schoolers in the room, I'm guessing a high schooler submitted this question, even going back to the idea of middle school, should you date to marry in high school or middle school in school?
I mean, if you're not dating to marry, what are you dating for? I guess is the question. Just for fun?
Preach.
Which then you get in all kinds of trouble. So I'm not saying date in middle school to marry like you're necessarily gonna marry that person, but you should be viewing your dating relationships as, is this someone that I could marry, should marry? And if it's no, then you shouldn't be with them. So I would say, yeah, you should be sort of. I'm not going to say yes, go out there and date everybody to find your husband immediately or your wife. But if you're going to date, you should be looking at them as potential future marriage material.
I think if you know that the person you are dating is definitely not the person that you should marry, then I don't think you should be dating that person. I think that's a really good test to see if this is a good person for you to date or not date. So if you already know that, like, this is not somebody I could see spending life with, then I would not continue on.
This next one is a very common question that we tend to get in today's society because of what is so present in today's society. What if the person I like is of the same gender? Do I just ignore those feelings?
It's no, you shouldn't just ignore those feelings, but let me explain. So we've talked about this in here, how God designed marriage, and if we just said that you're dating with marriage as the goal, we talked as marriage being between a man and a woman. He gave a specific design for those things. That's what we believe the Bible teaches us. That's what we believe God says. That's what we believe His design for marriage, dating, sex is. So I would say if you have those feelings, I wouldn't say ignore them in the sense that pretend they don't exist. That's what I mean. Okay, don't just pretend it's not a thing and just try to act like everything is not happening. That's not wise. What you should do is acknowledge that that's where you're at. That's how you're feeling. And then you need to be talking to, in this case, which we'll say a few times, you should be talking to your parents about all these kinds of things. Dating, marriage, sex, these are all things. Especially dating, what we say up here, we're going to try to point you to what we think God is teaching. But if you're thinking you're going to pull from us like rules for dating, that's not for us. That's for your parents. So I would say if you're in this situation, you should be talking to your parents about these things and engaging in those feelings that you're having. There's so if we believe that marriage is for a man and a woman, then anything outside of that is outside of God's design, which we believe is best. But that's true of a lot of things in our lives, that we are drawn to things that are outside of God's design. You can't just ignore it and think it will not be an issue. You have to be honest with it and address it. Talk to people that you trust and process. It's also, this is not fun to talk about, but you're not supposed to give into those desires or those things that are outside of God's design. So acting on those feelings would be going against God's design. That would be sin. Just like a lot of other things, if we act on what we lust and desire, what we want, sometimes it's outside of God's design. So we shouldn't do that. We should be exercising restraint, wisdom, and seeking what God has for us. I'm covering a lot of ground, so I'm not sure I'm clearly answering the question. Don't ignore it. Lean in and process it and find what God has for you in your path. And the reality is, like, some of us are not meant for marriage. Some of us are not meant for sexual relationships. That's just the reality, and that's not fun to talk about. Not everybody is going to get married, and that's part of God's plan for their life. That feels like cruel, maybe. It's not intended to be. It's not some kind of punishment. It's just, this is the path that God has laid out for you. And so it could be that that's your path. It could be that He has another plan. It could be that if you lean into God in those feelings, that someday you'll feel differently. I'm not going to promise those kinds of things, but to sum it up, talk to people that you know and trust and love, your parents. Talk to God and see where He leads you in that.
another thing that I want to say is temptation is not a sin. The reason we know that is because Jesus was tempted when he walked this earth, but he never sinned. So if you're ever tempted to lie or anything like that, that temptation to do it isn't the sin. The sin is when you go through with it and you actually lie. The other thing that's important to know is we all have a sin nature, which means that it is natural for us to lean towards sin. And instead, we have to choose to lean towards God and what it is that he wants to do. And like Jason was saying, his design. So there might be times where you feel those feelings of you like someone of the same gender, or there might be times where you feel like you want to lie in a certain situation, or you feel like you want to steal in a certain situation. It's not that you ignore those feelings, it's that you address them and, like Jason was saying, lean into God and believe that his design for you is best, and it is that way for a reason. So how do you get out of a relationship that is pulling you away from Christ?
Run really fast. This kind of goes along with, like, if you wanted to date someone who is not a Christian, it's just as bad if they are a professing Christian and they're dragging you the opposite direction. There are a lot of professing Christians who aren't following God, and that is a really important thing to be to have, like, discernment on when you're in a relationship. And just because they say, oh yeah, I'm a Christian, or like, we go to church. Well, are they walking with God? Are they following him? And if they're not, and they're actively pulling you away, then you shouldn't be dating them. Once again, you could be friends, and it'd be really great to, like, invite them somewhere, like here, invite them to church with you, but you shouldn't be dating them if they're pulling you away from God.
I think also they might not be actively pulling you away from Jesus, but if they're not pushing you closer to him, that's kind of the same. So at some point, you're going to start to drift away because your boyfriend, girlfriend, significant other, maybe someday husband, wife, isn't actively encouraging you to pursue Jesus. They might as well be pulling you away from.
Absolutely. These next two kind of go hand in hand. So the first one is, how do I get over a breakup? And then the second one is it possible to be broken up with by the one God made for you? So how do I get over a breakup? Is it possible to be broken up with by the one God made for you?
I'll take how to get over a breakup. I would say, number one, surround yourself with people that love you, and it would be really great if they love the Lord, but surrounding yourself with really good community. I would say talk to your parents about it. I mean, there's nobody who loves you more than those people, so talk to them. I remember I once had a breakup and I was really devastated, and my mom, like, slept in my bed with me, and she just hung out with me, all night, and that was just super comforting. And I don't know that I necessarily was like, that's what I need, but she ended up knowing what I needed. And so that was really cool. So I'd say surround yourself with people who love you, surround yourself with good friends. And in the end, like, knowing who you are and being confident in who you are is going to also help you get through that situation. Because when you know who you are, you're confident in you by yourself. So that's something you can work on before you ever even start dating someone, is really understanding who you are and being confident in that, and knowing that you don't need that person to be who God meant you to be.
What was the other question?
Is it possible to be broken up with by the one God made for you?
Are you tying it to the next question too?
Sure, we can do that.
Is it
possible to be broken up with by the one God made for you? But then there's also, is it possible to never meet, quote unquote, the person God made specifically for you? So the focus between these two questions is there the one out there, some one person that God made for you? And is it if that is the case, is it possible to never meet them, to be broken up with by them, so on and so forth?
I'm not sure how everybody up here feels, but I don't know if I believe in the one. Does God have a plan for your life? Yes. But God has given us the ability to make choices. choose things, and sometimes we make bad choices that leads us down the wrong path. So when I think about could God do this? 100%. So I'm not saying absolutes here. I don't think the Bible teaches that there is a one. It doesn't even talk about dating, really, right? This fantasized, romanticized view that there is one person in the world for you. I don't know if I believe that, because two people would have to be obeying God perfectly to align themselves in a place where they wind up together. Could God do that? Yes. So I'm not saying no, but I think we need to get past this idea of the one and more focus on us. And are we developing ourselves? Are we growing to be someone for someone else? Like, are we growing in our relationship with Jesus? Are we focused on that growth primarily? Are we focused on knowing ourselves and working down the path that God has for us? Or are we just focused on the one just walking into our life one day? We should be focused on growth ourselves. So maybe some of you guys disagree. I don't know. I don't think there's this one that God has for you. Anybody disagree?
No, I generally agree with that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's more like we don't know what God's timing is, so we don't know why he removes people from our lives. We don't know why he brings people in at certain times. But for example, Carly and I, we went to high school together. We had classes together. We knew each other. If we dated in high school, it probably would not have ended well if I had to guess. But so we waited, and then we found each other after high school, and that's when we were both more mature at that point to make the relationship work. So I guess it could be the timing, like the timing isn't right with that person, but it's hard because we don't know what God's plan for us is.
We also got into this conversation in my small group this past week, and it caused me to think about a family friend of mine who he got married super young. Him and his wife were like best friends, and they had like this beautiful marriage. They ended up having 10 kids together, which is insane. But they were married for like 30 years, and then she passed away of cancer. And then 5-ish years later, I think, he actually remarried and now has another beautiful, loving marriage with someone else. So it's like, if there's only a one person out there for you, does that mean that one of these people was the wrong one? And does he have the right one now, or was the right one the first one and the second one's just kind of like, meh, this one's here as a fill-in? Like, if it's wrong to have that idea of the one, because it's not necessarily that there's one specific person out there for you. It's there's someone that God wants for you to be able to honor him together with. And I got to see that in this family friend in both marriages. The fact that with his previous wife and his current wife, he was still honoring the Lord in the marriage that they had.
Yeah, I just think believing in the one, you kind of set yourself up for some disappointment or some failure in that situation, which is really difficult. But to say there's only one, then you're out of luck. Or there's this where, because it's two different people, what if you think that person is the one, but they don't think you're the one? So how does that work? I would just say it's potentially messy. So you should be focused on yourself. You're growing with Jesus, and then move forward on the path he has for you until someone meets you there.
So to kind of come to a succinct answer on those two questions, like, could you never meet the one? Could you be broken up with by the one? If there's someone out there that God wants you to be in a relationship with, you will end up in a relationship with that person. God is powerful enough that he can make those things happen despite whatever circumstances might try and stop it. So if there's someone out there that he has for you and his desire is that you'll be in a relationship with that person, it will happen. So next question, this kind of is going from, like, I'll just read it. It'll be easier. How do you tell someone that their boyfriend is not good for them? So this isn't our dating relationship. This is a dating relationship we're seeing.
I think it has to start out with previous relationship. I mean, you can't just go to anybody and say, hey, that guy ain't right for you. I mean, I think you need to have an established relationship before you have that kind of conversation. And so when you do have that, and you love that friend, and you're honest with each other already, then you can hold them accountable. just say, you know what, I love you, and I don't love maybe how this person's treating you, or I don't love how you're acting now that you're with that person. And so just having an open heart-to-heart conversation with your friend, and then kind of pointing out some things that you've seen, and do it in a loving way where you're saying, like, I want what's best for you, and I'm not seeing that in this situation.
And I think doing that lovingly is important, because if you approach it the wrong way, you're going to push them away from you and more towards that situation that they're in.
And make sure that the things that you don't like about the relationship is something that is actually harmful to them. If you just don't like that they're not spending as much time with you, that is sad. And that is something that you probably should talk to them about, because I'm sure they want to spend time with you too. But if it's something that, I just don't like him, but you don't actually have a reason, like they're not hurting your friend or pulling her away from God or not pushing her towards God. If it's not something that's a big thing, I probably wouldn't approach it at all, unless it's a big thing. But that's just.
I just wanted to add one thing. This wasn't necessarily in that question, but a lot of times girls will ask me, like, how do you know that guy is the right guy? And one of the things, like, on my checklist, I always say is that, like, ask yourself, do the people around you also like that person? And does your family like that person? And, like, how are they with their friends? So those are kind of like check marks that I always like to ask, is how do you know that's the right person? And so in that sense, it is important that the people around you like that person, and think they're a good person, because they know you and they want what's best for you. So for me, it's a sign.
Yeah, and there's also some just life skills here. Having difficult conversations is something you need to learn how to do. We kind of live now in this day and age where you can just go to someone and say, "Well, that's just how I feel. Deal with it." That's not skillful. That's not caring for them well. So if you're going to have a conversation like this, which is a difficult one, with a friend that you care about and you care about what's best for them, then you should have clear reasons why you think this, and then make it clear that you care about them and you have their back in whatever they choose. But here's clear reasons why I think this is bad. And this is true of dating relationships, of life, like all over the place. If you're going to approach someone and have a difficult conversation, have facts, not just feelings. Say, this is what I see. This is how I see you're different. This is what I'm thinking, seeing. Be very clear so that it's not just you reacting emotionally to something. Like, well, that's just how I feel. Deal with it. That's not caring for your friend well.
And I would say having that open conversation is so important, because you don't know what their relationship is like 100% of the time. The only people that know what their relationship is like 100% of the time is the two people in the relationship. So it could be when you're around these people, they're like joking around a lot and they're being super sarcastic and, ooh, that felt like it was kind of mean. I don't like the way they said that to them. But then if you actually have that open conversation, they can tell you, like, no, this person is the most loving, supportive person in my life, but that's behind closed doors. And you don't get to see that because you only see when they're in a group of people and they're joking around or being sarcastic and things like that. So making sure that, like, you're still presenting your concerns, but being open to not just being like, this is what I think, so this is right. Like, hearing their perspective as well. This next one is it's complicated. What do you do if someone tries to start a relationship with you and you like the person, but you like someone else more?
I would say, like, how much more do you like the other person? Is this just a situation where, you think he's cute or she's cute or whatever, or like you just like hanging out with them? Or is this actually you have like romantic feelings for them? I guess I would challenge, like, maybe you should just be friends with both of them.
Right. I guess how much do you know about them, and how much are you gonna like seek something out? I guess.
Yeah, this is back to that, like, how we're obsessed with romantic relationships. We overcomplicate situations like this because we feel like we need to have that person. Just take your time and just be friends and then see what happens. Really get to know them, and then it might be clear which one you're more interested in than the other. Don't rush to be in a relationship just because you think that's what you're supposed to do.
And if you say to them, hey, I just want to be friends first before I explore like a romantic relationship, and they're like, oh, well, never mind, I don't want that, that's a sign that maybe they weren't the right person for you anyway, because they should be open to having that friendship and building that first. So, because the reality is, if you do end up going with one person over the other, then you're always going to have that what if in your mind of, oh, was this the right choice? So building that friendship to find more clarity will be huge.
I was going to say, if I had to make the decision back when I was in high school whether or not I should be with Jason and date him and marry him and all that, then I just, that just wasn't going to work out. But because we were friends for so long, I got to know who he was, and he far surpassed any other guy that I might have been interested back when I was in high school and dating other people. So you never know where that relationship is going to go. But like having a friendship first, you're going to get to see so much more about that person than you ever would have seen before when you just make that rash decision of yes or no, do I want to date them?
Is going on a date and cuddling and such against the Bible at 13?
All right, well, as a dad of a daughter, yes. Also, I'm not, you don't have to answer this, but what do you mean by and such? That's a question you should think about. I would say talk to your parents about this. If for our daughter, cuddling and such and dating at 13 was no. You're too young to date, so you shouldn't be cuddling and such either. But that was our house rule that we were clear about, and our kids knew that. So you should be talking to your parents about these things. And if you haven't had a conversation with your parents about dating and the rules for dating, you should ask them. You should ask them, what are the rules for dating? When am I allowed to date? And ask these kinds of questions.
What you want may or may not be against the Bible, but it also may be against your parents' rules. So you want to make sure you're respecting them in that. Next one, what role does trust play in how you open up to someone? A big one.
You shouldn't open up to someone you don't trust. It's important.
Do we have any other thoughts on that? I feel like
I don't know. Without trust, it's really hard to be vulnerable and open, or you shouldn't.
yes. And if you feel like you can't trust someone, that's probably a sign that they're not the best person to be open and vulnerable with. So that was an easy one. This one might be less easy. How do you spot manipulation, love bombing, or gaslighting early on?
What is love bombing?
I also didn't know that.
I got you.
What?
No.
What?
Yeah, what is?
It's not on TikTok at all.
It's
No.
when someone bombs you with a bunch of love at the start of the relationship, and then as the relationship goes on, it kind of fades into they don't really show you love at all.
That makes
And,
sense
like-
why they call it love bombing.
And then it ends up being like toxic. I think that's
Yes.
the point. Not just that they don't love you anymore.
Yeah.
It's usually like it turns into like abuse.
Yeah. Because the reality is, any relationship that you start, the beginning of it is new and exciting. So everyone's going to be like, oh, I bought you flowers. Or, oh, this made me think of you. Or, oh, blah, 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 all this stuff because it's new and exciting. That will like slow down essentially over time. But that doesn't mean it was love bombing. It's when it turns into something that's toxic. And they're like, oh, this person used to act like they love me. And now they're being the exact opposite of that. So gaslighting, love bombing, manipulation, how can you spot those things early on?
I'm just going to keep going back to the same thing. I really think you should be friends first. That's really going to be your best way of protecting yourself from being in a bad relationship. If you get to know that person over time through friendship, you're going to know what kind of person they are. And if you should even take the time to get to pursue them more than a friendship. So that's really my best advice for that.
Yeah, I would say if you enter into a relationship too quickly, things can be covered up for a decent period of time, and there might be no signs of that right away at least. But yeah, if you become friends with them and you build that relationship with them, that would definitely help.
Yeah. Get to know them before you date. I don't like. We'll keep saying the same thing. You guys should be pursuing friendships at this point, and then seeing where they go. Because you don't really know. If you're just gonna say, "Oh, they're cute," I'm gonna date them, and you don't know them at all. You have no idea. So, like these kinds of things, how do you? Maybe they just give a lot of gifts, and that's within their character or their love bombing. How do you know unless you actually know them? So you need to just be friends first and get to know them.
I have two answers for this. I was gonna kind of say too. This is a very, like I mentioned TikTok before. It's a very big thing, a popular thing to like go on TikTok and be like, oh, he was love bombing you. Like, was he actually? Or are we just like dramatizing things, first of all? Second of all, if you are already in a relationship and those things are happening, this is another great opportunity. Now you might be the friend that's in a bad relationship. Go ask your friends what they think. If you're unsure, if you are sure though, you should break up with them. That's not healthy. It's not safe. It's not a good relationship for you to be in. So if you're already there, definitely seek help if you need help getting out. But yeah, you just shouldn't be in a relationship with someone who's doing those things if it's actually happening.
And along with friends, definitely talk to your parents as well with that.
So the next question is kind of similar. I've gotten cheated on multiple times, and both him and I are Christian, and he was kind and all of that, but how can I avoid this issue in the future?
Well, you could avoid it with him by getting out of that relationship. I just, if I don't know why you would put up with that. I guess if there's constantly tension in a relationship, or they're constantly doing things wrong, or they're hurting you, then they're probably not the right person. If you're constantly breaking up, getting back together, breaking up, getting back together, that's not good either. It could be that you actually care about each other, but you're not compatible as a couple. That could be true. So you just need to move on.
And if they're cheating on you, they obviously don't respect you, whether they're the sweetest person when you guys are dating or not. If they're still going to cheat on you, then they don't have a level of respect for you, so you just need to leave.
And again, we've mentioned being friends first like 18 times. So I hope that if you take nothing else away from this panel, you take that being friends first is important. But if you are friends first, you'll see if they're someone who is choosing to respect you, and do they respect their other friends and all of these things. What kind of character do they show? Would they cheat on someone? Is that something I could see happening? Or do they seem like the type of person who's very loyal and faithful in the areas where they need to be loyal and faithful? Things like that. When you know someone, you know who they are and their character, and so it makes it a lot easier to then avoid those red flags that you might come across, like gaslighting or cheating or anything like that.
And then I would just also like to say, going back to knowing who you are, being confident in who you are, is super important but even before you're entering a relationship, because then you know your value, you know what you're worth, and you should never ever accept being treated less than what you deserve. So if there's ever someone who is interested in other people while they're interested in you, like, you're worth so much more than that. Don't even give it your time of day.
And real quick, just to address, she said you should find someone who loves you the way you deserve. You deserve love. If there's ever any voice that's telling you that's not the case, that voice is not true. And it's probably Satan, so don't listen to him. But you are a child of God, one that he created, and he loves very much. And you should deserve to be loved by someone on this earth that same way. God was willing to send his only son to die for you. That's how much that he loved you. You should find someone of this earth who loves you that same way. All right, next question. We're wrapping up here. What makes it so difficult to leave a relationship where love is present, even when you know the dynamic is unhealthy and you're constantly trying to fix things?
This actually happened to me. I read this question. I was like, wow, I could have wrote this question. This is how I felt with my high school boyfriend. The one that I dated after Brandon rejected me in high school. And
that was not mentioned earlier.
It wasn't mentioned earlier.
It happens.
But they found their way back to each other because it was what God planned.
Anyways, but my high school boyfriend, I was like, oh yes, this is why Brandon rejected me. I'm going to marry him. He's amazing. And then slowly over time, I realized I love him and he loves me, and this is, like, we are good friends, but this is not a good relationship. That this isn't someone I should be marrying. I just knew that at the end of the day. But it was really hard for me to break up with him because I loved him and he loved me, and like, he made me feel good and he told me I was pretty and all the right things, but I just knew I shouldn't be marrying him. So it is really hard, and I think honestly at the end of the day, the only way that I could make it through was by talking it out with my parents and my friends, and them realizing or knowing that no, you shouldn't be marrying this guy. There's nothing inherently wrong with him. He's not a bad person, but you shouldn't be marrying him. So why are you still with him, kind of thing. And this was, of course, at the end of high school. That's why we were talking about like marriage and things like that. But anyways, it's a really hard situation to be in, but this is another great opportunity for you to talk to your parents about your feelings. I know it's your favorite thing to do, but they really do care about you, and I think they can help you through situations like this and figuring out like what is best for your life if you're confused about it.
Thanks, Carly. All right, we've got a couple more. Is it normal to constantly get, this one is funny to me, is it normal to constantly get icks from a guy you think you like?
Speaking from a married man, my wife tells me that I give her the ick all the time. So I would say yes, it is pretty normal.
I think it definitely depends on the level of ick,
Yes,
though.
I want to clarify. These icks are things like he's like touches me with like his bare foot. I don't like that. I'm not talking about things. Yeah, see, ew, gross, like disgusting. I'm not talking.
Wearing Crocs.
My icks are not things like he hurts me like emotionally or physically, or he's like mean to our kids or like something like that. These are silly things.
Surface level icks.
Yeah, surface level things that we say are icks because it's like a funny social media trend. But if you have real icks that are really like problems about someone, then yeah, you shouldn't date them.
Yeah, if you find those surface level things like, oh, I don't like that he touches me with his feet or whatever, that's normal to be grossed out by that. But there are certain levels of things where, like, if you're constantly being like icked out or grossed out or whatever, that's maybe a sign that you don't actually like this person. Because they said someone you think you like. So if you're constantly getting grossed out all the time by their actions, that's maybe a sign you don't actually like them.
I would say though, I feel like girls now, they like get the ick way too easy. I don't know.
Thank you.
It's like
Thank you.
Are there like tiers of ick? You know, surface level,
they are
major
tiers of
My icks are less than 1%. The what would be the opposite? I don't know. The good things are over 99%.
Yeah, this is like got back to the one conversation. You think you're going to find this perfect human being that, you know, when they walk in a room, rainbows show up and angels start singing. That person doesn't exist. So every person you date or end up marrying is going to have things you're like, oh, I wish they didn't do that. I wish they didn't act like that sometimes. That's just true. And they're going to say the same thing about you. So there is not like this perfect human. And I guess it depends on how you define ick and whatever. But
I just feel like I hear some girls who are like, he is just too nice. He gives me the ick. Like, what
He
is
walks
that?
so weird.
Ick. He is
So-
too loving to me. He
He's
gives me
too
the
nice and thoughtful.
He gave me flowers. Ick.
I'm just saying, as a girl, let's like stop getting an ick by like actual nice guys, like and good things. I just feel like I hear that a lot, and it's like, I don't really get that.
Well, I think movies and books and TV shows have made it so that like the bad boy is like, on top, and like all these nice guys are always lame and boring, and they end up winning in the end sometimes in some of these movies, but like the bad boy is like fun, but he's really not. It's the opposite. You should be attracted to the nice guys, and that shouldn't be an ick. So I agree.
All right, we're going to try and wrap up at 7:10, but we have two questions. This one is actually a certain student in the room who remains nameless, has my phone number and texted one in, and I think it's great, so we're going to talk about it. You guys weren't warned this one ahead of time. How do I help my friends if they've pursued lustful actions and they don't see it as wrong? Lust is a sexual sin. So anytime someone were to like engage in sex when they're not supposed to outside of marriage, anytime someone were to look at pornography online, anything like that, those could be defined as lustful actions.
Can you ask the question again?
Yes. How do I help my friends if they've pursued lustful actions and don't see it as wrong?
We're going to assume that you're close to this person and you have a good relationship. So we'll assume the relationship is there that allows you to be open and have these kind of tough conversations. You should approach it like if you're concerned, you should be able to point. This is like what I talked about earlier. You should be able to clearly state what you see the problems are and why you think it's a problem. If we're talking about sex outside of marriage, if we're talking about pornography, you can just look up statistics and studies that show the damaging effects, the actual science behind those things. If you want to go real deep, you can talk. This is why I'm concerned for you. It always should be from a place of concern for them. This is not good for you to do this, and here's why. That's why I'm coming to you. And at the end of the day, if it was a choice they made to engage in an activity, let them know that you still care about them. You still have their back. It's not like they're damaged forever. You don't want to turn your back from them. That's not right either. I know plenty of Christians who have walked away from friends because they made a mistake. That's not Jesus. Jesus walked with broken people. He defended broken people. He loved broken people. So we should still be a good friend. Just have the conversation. Here's what I see that's bad. Here's why I think it's bad. And I want what's best for you.
And if your friend is a Christian, then you can bring up to them what the Bible says about these things and encourage them in that as well. If your friend isn't a Christian, then obviously that likely wouldn't be effective for them, but you can still bring up what Jason was talking about of like, this is harmful to you. Because there are statistics out there about what pornography does to your brain, or statistics about the way that sex outside of marriage affects you and all of these things. So you can bring those things to that person and say, I'm worried about you for these reasons. I feel like the things you're doing are harmful to yourself, and I care about you. I don't want you to cause yourself harm in any way. Last question. How do I know if a guy or a girl is someone God wants me to be with?
Reframe the question. Does God want you to be with someone? Period. I think, question mark. I think that you should, like Jason said, not everyone is going to get married or should be married. I think you should start with that question and start with, am I supposed to be married? Talk to God about it. Or be with someone, I guess, and talk to God about it. And I think this is kind of the same question we answered before. There's not going to be the one. So even if you should be in a relationship, yeah, it might not be the one or the perfect person. But like Stephanie said, talking to your friends and like knowing what is good about them, the good qualities, and possibly even qualities you might have to deal with. How tolerant of that are you going to be at the end of the day?
I was going to say, I've gone through, my daughter and I have talked about this, and there's some people make these super long lists that are ridiculous. Kind of like Katie, when we had this conversation many, many years ago about her, 50-something things that she required a guy to have.
It was 15.
And it was there were some really...
And Tyler hit every one of them, I'm just saying.
There were some ridiculous things on there. Anyways, I will say there are some non-negotiables when it comes to who you should marry. Number one, do they love the Lord? If the answer to that is no, then I would just say that's not going to work right away. Do they make you a better person? There's so many things. Does my family like them? Do my friends like them? Do we share similar goals? Does he respect me? So there's lots of things on there that if the answer to a non-negotiable is a no, then it's a no.
I will say, I did have a list of, I wanted my future person to be thoughtful. I wanted them to be caring. I wanted them to be good at fixing cars because that's not a strength of mine, all these things. And while that list was hit for me, praise Jesus, the one thing that I always asked myself was, can I serve God better with this person than I could if I was on my own? And so that's what I would challenge you guys to ask. When you find yourself, if you're going to enter into a relationship with someone, ask yourself, could I serve God better with this person than I could on my own? And that's usually a pretty good way of hitting those bases of if they are someone who loves Jesus, you'll know that based on how well that they serve him. And is this someone who will love me like they're supposed to? If we can honor God better together, then that's likely the case. So I think that covers a lot of bases there.
I am very pro list though, actually. I mean, I think it's funny that you had a lot of things, but I'm very pro list. I had a list and my best friend had a list, and we're both married now, and both of our husbands checked everything on our list. So I don't think it's a bad thing to have a list and to to add things to over time. Like maybe even as you're dating people, like, oh wow, I didn't think about that before. My future husband needs to do XYZ. So
We're over time, so I'm not going to make us go too much further. But I will say one thing. On my list specifically, none of the things that I had were physical traits. Like it wasn't like, oh, he has to be blonde or he has to be whatever. Most of it was character qualities, and then there were some random things like good with cars, will kill spiders for me, etc. So make sure that when you're making that list, you're making something that is A, still attainable, like it's not unrealistic, and then B, isn't shallow. Like don't be like, I need someone who's at least 6'4" and can bench like 300 pounds. That might not be the most realistic, so don't set that standard for people. Anywho, we're over time, so I'm going to pray us out real quick, and then you guys will be dismissed.
Wait, can I say one thing quick?
Yes.
Great. We said a lot of good things, I think, but don't just listen to what we're saying. Go home and talk to your parents.
What Jason said, talk to your parents because they are the ones that you want to be honoring and respecting as well. So let's pray. God, we thank you for this time that we had together. I thank you for each person on this panel and the wisdom that they provided to us. I pray that you would help us to view relationships in a healthy way and in a way that is glorifying to you, God. I pray that we would respect your design for relationships, and that not only would we respect it, but we desire to live it out in our own lives. And I pray for each student in this room, whether they find themselves wanting a romantic relationship or that's many years down the road for them. God, I pray that you would just help them to grow in that wisdom and knowledge that they need now so that they can be prepared for any time that this might come up in their life. We pray all this in your name. Amen.